Let's bring in another expert on this, Professor Emeritus at Harvard Law School and author of Get Trump, The Threat to Civil Liberties, Due Process, and Our Constitutional Rule of Law, Professor Alan Dershowitz. Professor, thank you so much for joining us tonight. But before we get started, I want to wish you a very heartfelt happy birthday to you today.
Well, thank you. 85 years old and still kicking, still making trouble. So
God bless, and wishing you many more happy and healthy to come.
Well, thank you.
All right. As if 2 impeachments, 4 indictments, a mugshot, that wasn't enough for the left's attempt to get Trump. They now have a new tactic. Take a listen.
A push in some states to use the 14th Amendment to remove former President Trump's name from the ballot. The secretaries of state in 3 key battleground states are responding to those calls.
His actions on January 6th amounted to that they were in violation of him protecting the Constitution, therefore under the 14th Amendment. He has disqualified himself from being a candidate.
We've been saying all along that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment presents a clear and unequivocal statement. Donald Trump is disqualified.
You know, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment states that no one should hold office in the United States if they, quote, have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof, end quote. But Trump isn't even charged with insurrection. So what are your thoughts on this move to keep Trump off the ballot in 24, Professor?
Well, it is so unconstitutional. You'd think Jamie Raskin, who was in my first-year class at Harvard Law School, would know better, but he was taught also by Professor Lawrence Tribe, who thinks the Constitution means whatever the Democrats, the radicals, the left, and Tribe wants it to mean. Obviously, the 14th Amendment was designed to disqualify people who fought in the Civil War. It was obvious who fought in the Civil War. They still wore their Confederate uniforms. They were sons of the Confederacy. It was never intended to apply 150 years later. What's the process? How do you determine if a person was involved in an insurrection or a rebellion? There are some people who think that mayors who declare city sanctuary cities are involved in insurrection or rebellion. There are some people who think that people who violently protested the killing of George Floyd were involved in insurrection and rebellion. Insurrection and rebellion is in the eye of the beholder. You can't have a process for not only disqualifying a candidate, but you can actually remove somebody under their interpretation of the statute without having a process. There's no process. It doesn't tell us how to do it. Certainly, just because Jamie Raskin thinks he's disqualified doesn't make him disqualified. It's the most undemocratic approach. They're trying to get a dozen or few dozen people to decide who the next president will be. Secretaries of state are not elected to become the Electoral College. If they want to decide who's president, let them run for the Electoral College. This is absurd, dangerous, unconstitutional, and yet another weaponization of the Constitution for partisan purposes.
Extremely
and
well
I have
said.
challenged Professor Tribe, and I challenged Jamie Raskin, come on your show, let's debate this. 2 constitutional scholars, I know as much about the Constitution as they do. I've read it as often. I went back in the congressional debates. Let's have a debate.
They won't.
I challenge you.
Professor, that's not going to happen because they won't dare do it because they know you're right on the merits. But there's also been calls for a special session in an impeachment inquiry into the Fulton County DA, Fani Willis. But Georgia Governor Brian Kemp has rejected the eye completely. He said, quote, the bottom line is that in the state of Georgia, as long as I'm governor, we're going to follow the law and the Constitution, regardless of who helps or who it harms politically. So do you think there should be an investigation into Fani Willis to remove her, or what do you think there?
She hasn't committed an impeachable offense. I think there ought to be a congressional investigation as to whether or not she violated somehow her obligation to the citizens when she said she was going to try the case within 6 months. You can't try a 19-defendant case with multiple counts, RICO, within 6 months. Just like you can't try the D.C. case on March 4th with 12,700,000 items of discovery. You know, the judge and the prosecutor say, well, defense attorneys don't have to read it. They can just skim through it. Well, I know more about being a defense attorney than either of them. You don't just skim material given to you by the government. You read every word.
Absolutely.
You don't become an ineffective counsel or engage in malpractice. No judge can make you violate your oath of office.
Extremely well said. It would be tantamount to malpractice. Professor, as always, You're on point. Thank you so very much. We wish you a very blessed, happy, and healthy birthday. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you so much.